no. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Sue Moroney.
Thank you, Mr Chair, for the opportunity to participate in this debate, which we are conducting in a different way to what we have before. So I hope I will be on theme in asking the Minister, in particular under Section 99 and Section 105. And I haven't had the opportunity to sit on the Select Committee, so I just want some reassurance around the deleting or repealing the definition of correspondence school, and also in Section 105 of repealing the current Section 152 in the Act, which outlines the role of the correspondence school. I just want some reassurance that that is not disestablishing a feature of our current education system, and a feature that is particularly important to people in rural and isolated areas. I'm certain that this is not a stalking horse for getting rid of a very important part of our education feature, but I would like some reassurance from the Minister about why the definition has been removed and why the section of the Act that currently relates to correspondence schools is being repealed by the amendment bill that we are debating today. Further from the Minister, may I also request from the Minister some discussion about in 156 around the designation of character schools. And I just want to convey an issue that is currently being debated in the Waikato area and seek some reassurance that this is not a way that the Minister could use their discretion to address this particular situation. And it's the situation of agreements that have been reached about school transport from outer areas, pupils in outlying areas who are wanting to attend schools of special character. And I want some assurance that this particular provision about the Minister's discretion in designating which are character schools and which are not is not going to be used to deny those students education support and getting transport from outer areas to those schools of special character, because certainly that's a debate that's alive and well in the Waikato region at the moment and is of some concern, because those parents want certainty that the agreement that was established by the Education Department to allow school transport to be available for those children to travel from outer areas into Hamilton to special character schools will remain. So those are two areas that I'd just like some reassurance from the Minister. Correspondence school, will it remain? Well, I believe it probably has a different name now, but do the features of that for people in rural and isolated areas still remain? It's also, of course, sometimes a factor that's used in alternative education, and so those are another group of particularly vulnerable students, and I want an assurance that that service is going to remain available to them. And the issue associated with designation of character schools to ensure that it will not be used to I guess, allow the Education Ministry to cut costs in terms of school transport options.
Christoph Kunz.
Oh, thank you, Mr Chairman. You anticipated I was about to stand before